Hello everyone, this is Hemantagunam from SAP Labs Palo Alto. Today we are going to implement bullet chart in Lumira using Lumira SDK. So here is a bullet chart from the open source d3r.js, which is developed using d3.js JavaScript library. So the bullet chart is a chart where you have multiple ranges on which the measures are plotted as. Here you can see them as blue color bars, and we can have a target or a threshold as a vertical line for each of the metric or label or title of whatever it is, and it can have a subtitle also. So this is how the bullet chart looks like, and based on this example we'll be implementing our bullet chart in Lumira SDK. So this has the code of the index HTML file, the bullet JavaScript file, and the format of the data, how it should be. So the title represents the title or the metric, and there is a subtitle for it. And here we have three ranges which were plotted as gray color rectangle bars behind the original measures, which were plotted as blue colored bars, and the marker is a vertical black line. So the data format here is a JSON format. So we should figure out a way of converting the data from the Lumira, which is a cross table data. We need to convert it to JSON format, something similar to this, so that it can be fed to the chart, so that we can get something like this on the UI of Lumira. So let's go ahead and use the Hello SAP sample. So in my previous video, you have seen how I created a very basic example which actually shows a simple label called SAP on the Lumira UI with only one measure in it. But in order for this particular bullet chart to work, we need at least one dimension and three measure groups. This is because the dimension is the metric or the label or the title, and the measures would be one would be the first measure group would be the ranges. Here we have around three range values, so we should have one measure group for the ranges and one measure group for the real values, which are the blue bars, and one measure group for the threshold or target of this vertical line here. So we need three measures and one dimension for this bullet chart to work. So in order to do that, we need to go ahead and start editing or modifying the Hello SAP extension so that it will accommodate three measures and one dimension. So let me go and change the feed definitions XML file. So I have an existing bullet chart which I implemented. So I'll be opening that too. So you can see that my existing bullet chart has one dimension hierarchy and three measure value groups here. So one is the dimension hierarchy is labeled named as label, whereas the measures are values, ranges, and the marker. You can name it as measures, ranges, or target, or whichever is comfortable to you. And the dimension allows only one field, and at least one is mandatory. And so the values here, at least one is mandatory. You can have multiple values. And the ranges, initially we don't require any range at all. Um, and if you want to drag and drop ranges, you can have a max of two ranges, and you can have a minimum of zero markers or at least a maximum of one marker drop down to these measure groups. So in our Hello SAP sample, we have only one thing called values, and it's called my measure. So now what I would like to do is I would like to copy these field definitions into this thing. I'll be sharing all these files so that you can just understand how this whole thing gets edited. So I'm just copying these field definitions. So I'm deleting this, pasting the four field definitions here, and click on save. Okay, there's a small permission issue. Now click on save. So now this feed definitions XML got saved. Now we need to have the same feed definitions defined in our JavaScript file. So I'll open the LSAP and let's go to the feed definitions here inside. So we have only one feed here and it's of type measure for the LSAP example. But in here we need to have one dimension and three measures. So for that, let me open up my existing bullet chart script file. So here you can see one, two, three measures and one dimension feed definitions here. So I'll go ahead and copy the feed definitions. I'll replace the existing feed. You can just manually type down everything, but that would take too long. So save it. So now we have all the measures and the dimensions here. The only thing you need to modify here, instead of my measure feed, you need to replace with all the four feed names comma separated inside here. So that is like just copying is easier. Saved. So the feed definitions here we have the same ID whatever we have here, the same IDs. And one more thing is, right now in my chart extensions, we have only one sample called LSAP. So make sure when you're having another example, even the feeds unique ID should be distinct. They should not be similar. So if you have the same ID in a different chart, then it would give you some kind of errors, or even the chart that might not show up completely. So now you can see that the feeds pass to the module here, and I'm not changing all the IDs here because since I'm just showing you how to edit the Hello SAP extension in order to create a new chart, I'm just showing you the areas where the modifications are really required, and that's how I'm gonna just show you how to do the bullet chart using an existing or a basic template. So now let's go ahead, save it, and open Lumira and check whether the feeds or the measures and dimension groups were coming up properly on the UI. I'm using an existing Excel sheet to create a data set. Visualize, welcome, we have the Hello SAP chart. We can change the name of the LSAP to whatever you want in the manifest file. So now you can see here the values, ranges, marker, and the label. So earlier there used to be only one thing called the values now, but we changed it to three measure groups and one dimension group here. So now we have the feeds ready, and we mentioned that the values and the label are mandatory, whereas ranges and markers are not mandatory. So in order for this particular message to go off, we need to drag something onto the values and some other thing onto the category. So that, there we go. So that means these are mandatory. Even if the ranges and markers were not given, still the chart will load. So now since the measure groups and dimension groups are ready, let's go on and try to figure out a way of bringing the whole bullet chart inside the Lumira. So I'll exit this here. Open this up. So I'll go ahead and close the feed definition. So this is my JavaScript file, and this one is the bullet JavaScript file which I created earlier. Click on the bullet JavaScript file. if you observe here, so this is the function which will create each and every bullet for you. I mean, like one bullet each. So whenever this particular function is called, it will create one bullet for you. So I'll copy the whole bullet chart function. Mhm. It gets little tricky while copying things. So I will select this or even that. And I will go till the end. Okay, till here. So that means even this one. So that requires a bit of code here. And copy it and paste it maybe under this after registering the chart. So now you have the function to create a bullet. The thing is, if I want to create n number of bullets on the chart, so I should call it n number of times. So it's something like that. So I'm gonna pass the width of the bullet, and the height is like by default I have set it to 30. Even we can generalize it later on. So let's go ahead and call this function in our chart function. So if you remember in my earlier video, I mentioned you that in the module, the hello SAP chart is the particular function where the UI can be created. So, so this is the particular function where the UI will be created. And inside this, we also saw that inside the canvas, we can actually create the UI, and we appended the hello SAP string here. So the thing is, to the canvas, we will be appending n number of bullets or something like that. So, and the data should be feeded from the Lumira. So instead of feeding the data from Lumira initially, what we can do is we can actually have a hard-coded JSON string inside this particular JavaScript file. And once we were able to see the bullet chart in the Lumira UI, then we can replace that particular hard-coded JSON string with the data from the Lumira. So let me show you how we can do this as a whole. So last time we no longer need this. So on the canvas, what we are trying to do is we are trying to append a foreign object, and that foreign object is div, because whenever I have n number of bullets and it was going beyond the boundaries of the screen, then I would like to have a scroll bar on the right side. So that's the reason I have given the overflow x accident, because I'm sure that I'm fixing the max width so it won't go beyond something on the x direction, but on the y direction I'm setting it auto so that the chart we can actually scroll down. So to this particular div tag, I'm actually appending an SVG tag of all the data I have. And like if you know how this data thing works, then if there are n number of elements in this particular array, then this particular method will be called n number of times. So there will be n number of SVG elements that will be appended on it. And when we are appending each of the SVG element here to the div tag, what I am doing is I'm giving a call to a function called myChart. So this myChart is nothing but calling the bullet function which we have copied and pasted in the bottom, and I'm just passing the width to it. So whenever each time this get calls, a new bullet gets created. Whenever this gets called, a new bullet gets created. So if I have 10 elements in here or 10 elements in an array, then it gets called 10 times and I'll get 10 bullets out of it because this creates a bullet each time. So I'll have the hardcoded JSON string here. Yeah, see. So for example, if I have title 1, 2 and 3 here, so that means it gets called 3 times. So I'll show you how we can actually do this. So we have the canvas here. Simply just copy this particular part of the code and just copy it and paste it here. So it's the same thing. So I'm just gonna comment this thing up, the hello SAP text thing. So I'm removing the logic to append hello SAP, and instead of appending the hello SAP label here, what I'm trying to do is for the canvas I'm trying to attach a div tag, and inside the div tag I'm setting the overflow y to auto so that it actually will be able to handle n number of bullets on it. So and inside this I'm appending n number of SVGs for the data. So right now I need to get this data, so I forgot to copy this particular JSON data string. This JSON string is identical to the one which was given in the website. So maybe if you're not sure whether this gets loaded properly or not, so even what you can do is you can just give it right above your code logic here, exactly where it gets called for now. So now there are 3 titles, and for each of the title it will append one SVG element, and inside that it will append one G element, and it will call my chart n number of times, like 3 times here, and each of the time whenever this gets called, the bullet function gets called, and the bullet function is the one which will create uh, the bullets, or it's like a huge function here where you can see how all the scales are being created and how everything gets created, the ranges, the measures, and the ticks, everything. So it looks like it's almost ready. The thing is, we are not yet getting the data from the Lumira. Instead, we are just hard coding the data right now. So let's go ahead and open Lumira now and just check whether we were able to see the bullet chart with 3 bullets in it. So yeah, here we go. You can see we have the USA, UK, and India, and you can see the bullet chart for the 3 items, or the 3 items in the array in the dat variable there. So in order to remove this particular label, all the thing is you need to drag and drop some things onto the value and attribute onto the label thing, and here we go. Now you can see the bullet chart inside Lumira. So now the main target is uh, to replace the hard-coded JSON string with the data that is coming from Lumira cross table. So the thing is, Lumira, whenever you drag and drop fields into the values or ranges, markers, and the label, it actually builds a cross table, and detailed cross table uh, template is being presented in the Lumira help file. So you can just go and check how the cross table is and how the rows and columns are inside a cross table. So now what I have to do is I have to access that cross table and modify the cross table data into a JSON string where you have them as array of items. So once you convert the cross table into the JSON string, you just pass the same JSON string to the same logic we have existing. So that will show up the data dynamically from Lumira, and it will actually display you the bullet chart. So let me go ahead and close it. So here, so we know that the data will be populated into this particular variable called data. And right now we are not using it to display the chart, but we have to use it in order to display the chart. So um, right now we are just using the dat variable, just like that. And instead of this particular variable, we need to replace it with the data. I'm just pasting this here on the top of the, or on the beginning of the chart function inside the each function, so that this variable is mentioned in the beginning of the UI logic. So still the hard-coded string, I'm just still using the hard-coded string, and I have to extract data from here. So in order to do that, now in the Hello SAP example, we have only one measure, but now in our case, we'll have three measures and one dimension. So this is how it is. So we have one dimension and three measures, measure one, measure two, and measure three. If you notice, the dimension one is mandatory and the measure one is mandatory, but the measure two and the measure three are not mandatory. So I mean, if it's null, I'm just returning, setting the raw ms2 and the raw ms3, the measures, as null values. And if I have the values coming from Lumira, then I'll just extract those values. So you can see that I'm just accessing all the data from the data variable, which is actually a cross table. So let me go ahead and just copy this thing and just replace it. Even this thing, especially, and I think I should have a comma. Save it. And we no longer need this logic, because this is all specific for the Hello SAP, where I'm just concatenating all the values and showing it in that example, previous example. So I just removed it. So now we have all the data in this particular uh, raw dimensions and raw measures, and those raw dimensions and raw measures are converted to some meaningful dimensions, ds1, and measures ms1, ms2, and ms3. So now all these four are like arrays which contains data. So now I have to loop through all these four arrays and convert the arrays into a JSON string, which almost identical to the JSON string here. Here what we need to do is loop, as I said, we have to loop through the arrays we have, and we need to uh, make it as a JSON string, which is almost similar to the dat JSON string that we have right now here. So chart which I created earlier, I have an empty array, so I'm now just copying, commenting my existing JSON array. I'm just copying the code which converts the arrays into a JSON string. So this is all the code I need to copy. So what exactly it does is, if we have like few measures as mandatory and few dimensions as mandatory and few of them as optional. So when we have an optional measure, then we need to check for conditions to build the JSON string, in order that we don't get any exceptions or null values in the JSON string. Uh, so that is the reason we have all these else if loops. So if you really want to print your JSON data, you can always just print the JSON string onto your canvas and check whether you're getting the JSON string in a proper way or not. So once you confirm that your JSON string is proper and is properly formatted, uh, maybe initially you can just start with a few lines of data, and then you can check how the JSON string is coming up on the canvas. Once the JSON string is ready, you can just use that particular JSON string or the code logic in order to feed the data into the chart. So I'm just copying this and pasting it here right under the arrays. So here we go. So now what it does is we are going through each and every array and we are converting those arrays into JSON string. Like we have a title here and we have ranges, measures and markers. So I'm just getting title from the dimension, and right now we don't have range here because suppose if we don't drag it and drop any field on the range, then the ms2 is null, so then there won't be anything on the range. So that is the reason I'm using all these if else conditions here. Maybe we can use switch. It's up to us, like whatever the code logic it can be. So similarly the markers here also null. So this is how I actually build the entire JSON string based on the measures and dimensions available with me, and I'll push that into the dat variable here, dat variable. So it actually builds the whole JSON string, and I'll be sharing this code with you so you can just go through the whole logic of how it actually builds. So now let's open SAP Lumira and check how you'll be seeing the bullet chart. So I'm using this same Excel, connect wire, it's all visualize, and I'll select my extension. So there we go, we can see the like this time many bullets with the scroll bar on the right side. So now let me drag and drop something onto the feeder so that we can see the real bullet chart in action. So I'm just dragging and dropping quantity sold onto the values, and if I drop something onto the label, then the message should go off there. So I'm dropping category onto the label. So here we go. So now you can see the bullet chart here with all the categories listed on top of each bullet, and you can see the measure plotted as the blue bar, and the gray back bar is the range. But right now, since we don't have a range, it has a default range, so that is the reason it's plotting in full, and all the values are shown at the right end are the measure values. So now if I really want to drag and drop a range, I'm just dropping sales revenue onto the range bar, and then you can see how the bars are plotted. Now the measures are plotted with respect to the range, and whenever the values are greater than 1000, then all these ticks were marked with K, which indicates thousands. So I'll drag and drop discount also onto the marker, or which is a threshold or target, whichever it can be. So it actually marks a black line on the measure bar. So this is how it looks like. So this is the bullet chart working in action from the real data from the Lumira, and the entire data is getting feeded from the Lumira feeder. So this chart can be as generic as possible. Right now I'm using this particular data set. You can use it with any data set which has some values and which has some ranges and which has a target or a threshold or a marker, and you can just aggregate all these values based on some metric like a label or maybe a product name, or based on a manager or whatever it can be. So still most of the features of Lumira work here. If you want to filter something, all the thing is you need to just use the category here for as a filter. I'm selecting few of the values to show how the filter works in here. So this is how filter is working even on the extension. So if you want to sort the quantity sold by descending, then we just click on sort descending and it shows the sorted values descending. So I click on save, the visualization is saved. So all the functionalities which exist in Lumira are still applicable to that. So this is how the bullet chart looks like, and this is how we implemented it. So thank you for watching this video.